Alright guys, this is going to be a video response to the guy, something along the lines of Jack of all trades. He did a video of an alternator change out of a 2006 Dodge Caravan, and I just happened to have a coworker whose alternator is taking a shit. So what I have diagnosed is that there is a bad bearing in this alternator. And the way that you tell with a bad bearing is there are stethoscopes that have a needle that go to it that you can just basically touch it and hear with inside the item for anything that's internal to properly diagnose that part of the issue. So, excuse the mess, but I'm going to go ahead and turn the car on so you guys can hear it. Oh, well, I should probably connect the fucking battery back first. Give me just a second to do that. There it goes on. And I wouldn't recommend doing this barehanded because you might shock yourself and won't feel very good. But let's alright, so this whining noise is coming from the bearing that's inside that alternator. And what that means, because you can hear it in here, but what that means is that everything that's inside that alternator is eating itself up. So the charge, or the electrical charge coming from the alternator to the battery is working, but it's working intermittently. So after replacing the battery, checking the voltage with everything between the alternator and the battery, everything checks out. Only problem is that the battery light kept coming on with a check engine light that gave a code of P0113, which indicates a bad electrical charge, which is coming from the alternator. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and redisconnect the battery, because we don't want anything grounding out on us or hurting anybody. Then, like that. And then, yes, there were these things. These are called body fasteners, and we use these in auto body to hold these in place. Now, this one I've already removed, and the two others that he was trying to show you guys is, you can faintly see it, but there's one right there, and that one right there. And then on this one, this doesn't have any bolts, because all of these should have body fasteners on them like this one does. There are tools that are called panel pullers, and they look like little forks, and they slide right in between there and they come out, and that's how you remove these without breaking them. So I'm going to remove these real quick and I'll be right back. Now that we got this shield off, for those of you who don't have the tool that I was talking about and want to use a screwdriver, make sure that you guys are using it so that you are not using the flathead to pull the head of this off, because you will break those. Make sure that you're using it behind the plastic and using it to pry it out. That way you're not busting them. Okay. So the next thing that we need to do is we need to get to this tensioner to remove this belt. So with this one, you guys should always be replacing the belts when you're doing the alternator, but because this is a buddy's car and this is all he can afford, we're just going to replace the alternator today. But there is a tool that you can use that goes in that square piece. That is called a tension bar, or you can use what's called a breaker bar. And what this will do is it will relieve the tension from this belt, so that way you guys can go ahead and remove this belt. So I'm going to stop here, go get the tool, be right back. So before I forget, because I got a phone call and I had to stop for a second. So 13 millimeter to take this nut off, which that nut comes off of right in there. And basically use a 13mm in a ratchet, start it, and then use an extension, and then use the extension and just wind it out. And then there's going to be a plug down there that I haven't unplugged yet, and I haven't pulled this off yet because I'm trying to save everything for the video. And yeah, so let's get back to the bottom here. Ugh. Don't ever get old, guys. It sucks. But I finally got the damn belt off. Didn't get to use the breaker bar like should have, and the reason for it is, so let me get down here real quick and adjust this. So the gap between the frame of the car and the tensioner up there just doesn't fit. And so what I did was, where's it at? I used this, and it is a very thick flathead screwdriver. You just stick it right up there in that hole, and let me see if I can coordinate this while using the camera. So this goes in here, and then do not be afraid to put strength on this, guys, because you're gonna need to do this to fucking, I need 2 hands for this, but yeah, you basically just pry up against the frame of the car. It'll come down. It'll loosen up the belt. Now you guys should always replace this belt, but again, because this belt is looking pretty decent, I'm just gonna move right to it and take out that alternator. So with that said, there are 2 bolts that you need to get to when you're down here. Obviously that'll be the first one. That one right up there will be your second one. You can access that from the top. So if you're already down here and you've already got everything that you need to do it, might as well just go ahead and get it while you're down here. If you don't, either way, you guys can do it one way or the other. What we're going to be using to get those bolts off is going to be a 15mm deep socket, or you can use a shallow socket and an extension to get into the necessary areas that you're going to need to do this job. Alright, so hopefully the music I have going on isn't too loud, but so the guy that was doing this, the jack of all trades guy, he had showed after the new alternator goes in that there is a little zip tie method you guys can use to help hold this in place. When you're taking this out, make sure that you're not taking the bolts out all the way completely, and just leave them so that they have a few threads so that it's still holding. But I'm going to show you guys how to take all this off. So assuming that you guys took the bolt or the nut off for that, remember it was a 13, and let's get this out of the way. Also too, he also mentioned about moving the dipstick when you guys are doing this. This is just a piece of metal. You guys can easily, I mean, it takes a little, you know, strength, but you guys can move it and you guys won't hurt it. And then this plug down here, there should be a little clip on the opposite side that's usually used to lock this in place, very much like what this looks like up here. If you guys are planning on dropping in from the top, which is probably going to be the method for this particular alternator. Oh, well, from the looks of it, I may have to take this piece off. I'm not hoping that I don't have to, but should be enough room to be able to drop this right behind it and then just scoot it on in there. So let's go ahead and start popping some of that stuff off. Alright, so I ran into a tad bit of a problem that I had to walk away from and come back for. This piece right here, there are 2 10mm bolts that go into the side of this in order for you to get that alternator out, which is currently sitting on the floor. But I also removed this spark plug cap. You just pull on this and it pops right off. It is very important, do not lose that gasket, because that gasket needs to go right back in between that when you guys got to put that back in. So with that said, now that I've got this out, I'm going to start making my way down to the store and talk to you guys about new parts, refurbished parts, and OEM parts. So as I'm flipping a U-turn here. So we have used parts, we have OEM parts, and then we have companies that distribute parts that are just OEM quality, but they're not exactly your average auto parts store quality. What happens is that these auto stores who sell the refurbished parts, what happens is that, let's say the alternator that we're replacing, they're going to send that out to their warehouse, and basically they're going to diagnose the problem with the bad alternator, and they're going to fix the that alternator and sell it as a refurbished part. So when you guys are ordering refurbished parts and they are giving you their warranties for it, that's because that they are making sure that their used parts that they are selling they're getting back that are tagged saying that these are rebuilt and they're good to use. They can be replaced should something happen to them in the event that you guys purchase them and it doesn't work. Then there are parts that come from auto stores that are not quite OEM, but they're just right below OEM. And for those of you who don't know what OEM is original equipment from the manufacturer. So all of your stock parts that you're not getting from like Checker or AutoZone. There are companies out there that I particularly use called CarQuest. They sell parts that are not OEM, but they are better than the parts that you get from like AutoZone. So expect to pay a couple of more bucks if you go that route. There really isn't that much of a big difference other than a peace of mind. So the way that I look at it is, it's very much like when you're purchasing a vehicle. If you're purchasing a car that's $500, chances are there's some problems with it. If you purchase a vehicle that's $5,000, you're not going to have as many problems as you would with a $500 car. So if you decide to purchase a new refurbished alternator that's $169, which is what I'm going to go pick up right now, versus a brand new one that O'Reilly's, or what used to be Checker, could order for me, which would cost me, I think it was like $389. Because this isn't my vehicle, and that I'm just I'm purchasing and picking up the parts for what the customer is asking. I'm going with their budget, so we're getting the $169 with the 1 year turn-in. Now, for those of you who don't understand what core returns mean, when you guys get a quoted price, let's say the alternator, they say it's $169.99 plus the core charge. The core charge is your old alternator. So what will happen is that you'll get charged the $169 plus whatever the core charge is that they're going to charge you for the alternator. So let's say it's $30. So now it's $199 plus tax. You're going to end up paying that $199, and then when you return the core or your old alternator to wherever it was you got the new alternator from, I really wish these guys would fucking turn. Jesus. So yeah, once you return the old alternator or your core, you will then receive that $30 back. So if you guys purchase it with a credit card or a debit card, they will end up putting the $30 back on that card that you used. So please be sure that you have your card and valid ID for the card that was used. If you guys paid cash, then they will give you cash back in return. But that's how that works. And then there's the OEM, where you would basically have to go through the dealer to get the really expensive part to do a very simple job. So 9 times out of 10, you don't need to go purchase an OEM part unless it's something very specific, or if you're using or own a luxury vehicle, let's say like Mercedes, for their batteries, you have to go to the dealer to go get it replaced. You can't just walk in the store and go get it, or find one on Craigslist and go get it. It just doesn't work like that. So, but anyway, so I'm gonna go walk into O'Reilly's here. I should be there in about a couple of minutes, if that, and pick up the part, head back to the house, and put in this new alternator and go drop off the car and make some money and start on this new bucket of turd that I'm driving right now to.
And now we have the new alternator, and it's been approved. So
now it's just a matter of reversing the step process of putting this back in here and making sure that everything lines up, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and do this and spend the next 20 minutes or so knocking this out, and I'll be back. So I forgot to finish up the last of the video. So real quick, just to kind of highlight what had taken place and what we need to do to go ahead and finish this. Let me take this out. Is basically you're going to double check all your work. Make sure that your bolts are tight. Make sure that all your plugs are plugged back into the alternator. Make sure that those little red clips that I had showed you, make sure those are pushed back in and they are locked. If they are not locked, then you need to make sure that those are nice and snug, and then try to relock them again. They should make a click noise. If they make a click noise, that means that this is locked, and those serve a purpose, you know. So when you're driving and that alternator's rattling because that belt's spinning, what will happen is those vibrations will eventually rub that off, and eventually it'll pop off, and you'll go back into running into problems. So if you don't know how to diag, so just make sure that you guys have that done. If you guys pulled any of the plugs off of your spark plugs, or basically your plug caps, make sure those go back on. If you did, and I'm pretty sure you will have moved your dipstick, I would move it back. It's not going to be a big deal if you don't, but it's just a good idea to kind of put it back to where it was. You know, again, this is just reversing the steps. If you did happen to break any of the plastic body fasteners, you can go anywhere and go pick them up. They're very cheap. In the event that you don't, and you happen to have a couple of bolts and nuts laying around somewhere, it's very simple to do that, and just take a washer that's the appropriate size, put it on the bolt, put it through, and put the nut on the end and tighten it up. And then other than that, that's it. And then real quick to the guy that I'm video responding to, no disrespect for some terminology that I used to what he had used. This is just more of showing in an educational purpose that that this can be done, and that the video that he did post did in fact help with this job. There were some things that were not clear, and I felt the need to go ahead and clarify some things. So I'm pretty sure that the van that he was working on was a Grand Caravan, which was a later model, which is why the tensioner looked a little different from the tensioner that I have. Same year, same van, but there's a difference between a Caravan and a Grand Caravan. So if that wasn't specified, that's half the reason. So made things a little bit more difficult, because with that tensioner, it makes things a lot more easier. But yeah, any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to hit me up on the video, shoot me a message, and I will get back to you guys appropriately and as soon as I can. If you guys have any other requests or videos or want to see something, feel free to shoot a message, and I will see what I can do.